I'd like to welcome Mr. Paul Elum to the show. He's the founder for A Voice for Men. It is one of the largest and most influential men's organizations. And he's no longer with them. He's doing new and exciting things. And welcome, Paul.
Happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. It's an honor to have you on the show. So, first of all, I kind of want to know the history of how you got involved. What was we all have this like wake up to where we go, oh my gosh, look what's going on with the men. What was that for you? What was that light bulb that went off?
I can tell you precisely when it was. It was in November of 1993. I had been having questions for a long time. I worked in the mental health industry and substance abuse treatment. And of course, issues of gender and things like that came up regularly in that environment. And I had started questioning what was going on. I knew there was something wrong in the world, but had no idea how to put my finger on it. It was something mysterious out there that was just, what's wrong with this picture? And I didn't have a language to describe it. I didn't have the consciousness to describe what was happening. And I was talking to a friend, happened to be a female therapist, and she said, I heard about this book by a guy named Warren Farrell called The Myth of Male Power. And the moment I heard that, it was like, uh-oh, ding, 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 there's something for me. So I rushed out to buy the book, and I spent the next couple of days not sleeping and reading this book that put the finger on what was bothering me in a way that was so profound, so life-changing that
Yeah.
I went from walking one direction to boom, I was going in another. I finally said, here's what's wrong. Here's what's wrong with the world. I'm working with all these male clients and female clients, and we have discussions about their relationship lives and everything that's going wrong. But I was like a kid lost in the woods trying to get anywhere with this stuff. And when I read The Myth of Male Power, it was boom. Okay, now I've got a language. And then I started finding out how much people did not appreciate that language when I started talking about the issues. So, I mean, that's November 93, baby. That's when I was born into this movement and
Right.
haven't looked back since.
It's like you go down that rabbit hole and you just can't ever come out, and you can't unsee it anymore. And then you see it in everything, every movie, every commercial, every interaction. You're like, oh, and I can relate to that. Um, right now in society, and we'll go back in time because I'm so interested to hear what you have to say about how we got here. But what do you think today? What are the greatest obstacles and challenges facing men today that is, putting them in kind of a crisis?
Well, I think at the root of it, it's the same problems that men were facing in the late 1800s when Belfort Bax started writing on feminism and on men's issues. And this was a devout socialist, but they came for him, came for his money, tried to crucify him in the court of public opinion. The problem is that you cannot challenge women's power. You can't even articulate what women's power really is without instant resentment and reaction from people. It's like the entire society colludes with each other to remain silent about the nature of women's power and the nature of men's powerlessness, especially with women. These are taboo subjects that have always been taboo, and it today is the main obstacle to us getting anywhere with men's issues.
Right? If you dare to say anything about men and what they're going through, or how the women have the power, now you're a misogynist. You're somehow tearing down women if you try to lift men up at all. And you have to keep the narrative that women are so oppressed and always have been. And therefore, men can't have any problems or complain at all. No one listens. No one seems to care. And that's
We
so
have
the
to
label, you know,
we have to live by a model of female powerlessness. We must view women as victims, as powerless. And the moment we acknowledge like their power in family courts or their power in social life or their power in marriage, which they have in abundance, huge amounts of
yes,
power. But if we
yes,
even try to recognize that that power exists, where immediately the attempts are to shame us into submission and to
right,
say, no, no, I'm sorry, women are powerless. They're picked on and men have been oppressing them forever. That's the
yeah,
only narrative we allow.
right. I mean, I have to dance all around it when I'm making content, even on YouTube, because, you know, the robots that listen, you know, they pick up these words and, you know, demonetized, and they kind of shadow ban the video.
Yep.
And you go, I could say the wrong thing and my whole channel could be taken down. And I'm not saying anything scandalous. I don't, you know, I don't hate women, but you're right. You can't challenge that. And that leads me to, is there any point in history that you can point to where we had it right? Like before this whole, you know, man bad, woman sugar and spice and all things nice. When was that? Because it seems to me it's way longer ago than most people even realize.
I think we had it as, I mean, when you're talking about power dynamics between men and women, some of which is sexually charged, I mean, it's a complicated issue. So if I want to nitpick, I would say I would go back in history and say we never had it right. But I'm not wanting to nitpick in that way. I think that for the 20,000 years or so before we came into modern life, that we pretty much had it right, especially from the point that marriage was recognized as either a covenant or an institution when it was uh, arranged marriages that were governed by laws of dowry, of bride price, or wherever we were at in history on the value of labor, we had it pretty right. I mean, it was there was always oppressive roles to being men. I mean, it's not funny being cannon fodder when there's wars, and it, that's the way it is. Now we can say that's unfair. I would challenge that. I don't think it's necessarily unfair. It's the way things were. We don't live in a perfect world and we're animals. So
Yeah,
we're going to
life.
have imbalances.
Yeah,
But overall, men and women worked cooperatively for a very long time in order to create families and to further the species. And now you take a look at birth rates, at the relationship between the sexes right now, and you can see we're headed right into a hole. So we had it right, I would say, up until about 150 years ago, till the romantic model took over marriage and people cast aside tradition in order to pursue fleeting feelings for each other. And then, of course, those feelings die. And then they figure out, wow, I'm with the wrong person. And here we
right,
go to divorce court and children's
right.
lives being ripped apart, all these things. So I think we had it right up until the romantic model.
I tend to agree with you. Right now on my channel, we are kind of tracing things back. And we just finished the 1958 book, The Decline of the American Male. Actually, the conclusion will be this evening, but or Thursday evening. And it's amazing to trace it back and kind of look at what men were saying in 1958. Do you know what I mean? Because some of these so-called traditional women or tradcons or whatever you want to call them, they think going back to the 1950s is better. And I'm like, no, that was such a soft life for women. That was a point in time where men were absolutely just utilities and the women had dishwashers and washing machines and all that stuff, sent their kids to school. You know, I don't look at that as actually traditional. I would go back to, you know, before Seneca Falls
Oh,
and
you know, when people say I want a traditional marriage, my first question is which tradition are you talking about?
Exactly.
If you're talking about this guy down on his knee with a diamond in his hand and her with the dishwashers and her challenge is being which TV show she wants to watch at 3 o'clock, that tradition is a very short-lived new kid on the block that is obviously not working out very well. If you
Right.
want real tradition, go to dowry, go to bride price, go to arranged marriages. Those are
Right.
the long-standing traditions. But people nowadays, they think that this romantic model of the 1950s has always been the case between men and women. And
Yeah.
nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. There's a much longer history before that, but I think I don't know. Tell me what you think about how much propaganda and things of that nature has pushed us to the narrative that we have about, well, the reality that we have about female power. Like, what role did propaganda and media and all that kind of thing, movies, everything like that, how did that shape this reality that we're living in right now, where the women have the power, basically?
Well, and it's not just having the power, but it's how it's used. I mean, we've had
Oh,
romantic
right.
propaganda out of Hollywood for a long time. We've been brainwashed even from the time that we're toddlers watching cartoons. You have the knight in shining armor that saves the damsel and buys her a dishwasher. So
Sure.
that's the model we go by. But then in the late 1960s, enter gender feminism. One, the romantic model promotes women above men, period.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it does. It starts with a guy on his knees and it ends with
Mhm.
a guy in a box. That's the romantic model and how it works. Now come along gender feminism, takes that model and then starts infusing the propaganda with hatred and with blame and with victimization. And so you end up with, we call it in the psychological field, hostile dependency. You end up with women who claim they don't need men, who could not live without men at all, wouldn't make it a week without men
Right.
in their lives, building things and doing things. But you have
Right.
women who hate men but can't live without them.
Right. And they don't realize it, do they? They don't
No,
realize who made the computer that I'm on and who's keeping the lights on and who's keeping the sewer system running and the trash picked up and all that. That is completely like invisible to them. And they don't understand. If we snapped our fingers and all the men disappeared, the women would not last long. We
no,
just really wouldn't. But we get the whole I don't need no man and I'm strong and independent. And you're like, no, you're not.
no, you're not.
You're not. You're not.
You
You
couldn't
think you
be.
are because you've seen too many movies.
You would literally die or freeze to death within a short period of time without men running the infrastructure. And
Right.
what we've done, we've so separated people from the infrastructure. I mean, I think there's grown men now that think the cool air ferry brings the air conditioned air into their home and that there's a turd fairy taking care of their waste that comes out of the bathroom. They have no clue really what's
No,
going
they
on,
don't.
but most
Um, yeah.
women are clueless about what keeps them alive,
Yes.
and it's not
Absolutely.
Oprah.
And I think that we have a real problem with the women and them being grateful and appreciating things because these are things you should appreciate, but they don't notice any of it. They're very centered on themselves, what they're doing, how they're amazing, and they pay their own bills. Woohoo! You're an adult. You know what I mean? And they're just completely oblivious to the goodness of men. They're just they soak up the propaganda, and when somebody asks them if you're in a forest, which would you rather come across, a bear or a man, they say bear because they're so trained that men are inherently predators.
Yep.
But but they don't think about their fathers, their brothers, etc. But then again, if they grew up with a single mother, they could be very alienated from their father and hearing the kind of thing like all men are bad, I hate men, all that, all the things you couldn't flip around and say it the other way around, but you can totally say it that way. And I think kids being raised by single mothers who have resentment towards men really adds to that. And I think also adds to the men who have no idea that there's even infrastructure. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's the fairies that are doing it. What do you think the role of, because we have an epidemic of single mothers, even if they're just divorced, I still think they're single mothers. What do you think the impact is on society from all of that?
Well, I
Single
can tell you
mothers.
that right now we spend, in the time when there's $37 trillion in debt, we spend $421 billion a year on entitlements for single mothers. That's nearly $500 billion a year on entitlements for single mothers. And these are women. And here's the thing. And again, I don't want to turn this into a session bashing women, but I
No.
think we have to acknowledge the reality that these women that are saying, I don't need a man, I take care of myself, I don't want a guy doing this or that, or don't need him to pay for things. Those same women, when they connect with men, if they're heterosexual, are as calculated about that man's money as you can possibly imagine. Every last one of them. They know for a fact that they're angling for his support and his caretaking, even as they're spouting a bunch of nonsense about not needing a man. Total hypocrites and liars. And that's what we've turned women into. And I blame men for this. Men have tolerated this and enabled it, and it's just horrible.
Well, I mean, women wouldn't be able to do it if there weren't certain men propping it up. I mean, who are the judges? Who are the ones that made the laws? Generally speaking, those are men. So it leads me to, and I'm kind of a tinfoil hat wearer, but it seems, I mean, the state is subsidizing this.
Yep.
The state is encouraging this.
Another word for the state is you and I. Our money is subsidizing.
Absolutely. Yes. And I know that the state, the government, they get a lot of money from child support, alimony. I've heard $1 billion a year was the last number that I heard, which is just incredible. And most people have no idea about that. But I also think, and you can tell me what you think about this, you don't have to wear a tinfoil hat too.
Oh, I got one. I'll put it on.
All right, good. We're good. We'll go. Okay. So it seems like the state likes this for the money, but also, do you think it's in the state's best interest to break apart families?
No. Of course, long term, it's not. But the state is actually a body of short-term thinking politicians. So while it's not in the state's interest at all, it's going to ultimately result in civilizational demise to stay on the track that we're on. But short term, it gets votes because women vote in their own interest, period. They may be starting to change a little bit recently. We did better with them voting for society in this last election, but as a rule, men vote for what is in society's interest and women vote for what's in women's interest.
That's so true. Gosh, that's so true. There's so many things I'd like to say on that, but it's not quite YouTube friendly about the voting situation. But yeah, the voting situation.
Go ahead and say it.
Oh, no. People's whole channels have been taken down because of that. Anyways, do you think, going back to this whole like females having power, I recently read in The Decline of the American Male about how dating, the kind of when dating started to be a thing, which people don't realize, dating hasn't always been what we do. Like you said, arranged marriages, things of that nature, semi-arranged marriages where father was very involved and could veto, certain suitors. But what the book said was that when dating, became a thing, it put women in charge, because now boys and girls were alone, and so they started making out and doing what boys and girls do when they're kind of alone, and that made women the gatekeepers of sex. So now the guys are trying to sort of be good enough and please them and everything to get the nookie. And that kind of shifted the balance as far as who is in charge. And when you take that and it goes into marriage, you're really lopsided because she has the upper hand. What do you have any comments on that? Or
Well, I think what you just described is absolutely accurate. We have turned women into the gatekeepers of relationships, not just sex. And I think that's the even the more important part of it. Women have always been the gatekeepers of sex in terms of saying no or yes, except with some exceptions, has always been up to them. And I mean, there's always the aberrant rapist, something like that. But women's yes or no has traditionally always been respected by men.
yeah,
But now they're the gatekeepers of relationships, and men show up hat in hand. What do I and become turn into shapeshifters? They've
yes,
abandoned their own sense of worth. One of the things that's happened in that is that we have hammered men for 60 years now about how worthless they are and how bad they are toward women. So
right,
part of that mentality comes with men when they're hat in hand saying, what do I have to say? What do I have to do to make you smile, to please you, to
right,
prove that I'll be the right kind of man for you? And I'll be anything you want to be. Just tell me what it is. And
right.
gosh, what could go wrong there? Uh, because once you've been in that relationship for a year, men start figuring out, well, I really didn't want to be all that. And
Right. It's
here comes
old because you've gotten the nookie, and the nookie gets old, and now you're like, oh, I'm being treated like a second class citizen. Even worse after the marriage, because I think that women also sort of put on this production
sure.
of a little bit more feminine, a little bit nicer. They're not gonna like take off the mask and
Oh no. But well, because the basic rule is yes, the nookie gets old, but the wallet never gets old.
the wallet never gets old, right? Yeah, yeah. Oh, my money is my money, and your money is my money. I mean,
I've never seen a woman get tired of a man's money. It's just never happened, I don't think, in human
that's
history.
true. That's true. But they're strong and independent. Schrodinger's feminist is one of my favorite
Yep.
uh, sayings I've heard. Around the red pill sphere, because it is. It's like I'm going to be a victim and I'm empowered at the same time. I get to be the victim and the hero. I'm like, no, you don't. You're really not either.
Yes, I
You're
get
really
to
not
be
either one of those
strong
things.
and powerful or weak and victimized depending on what advantages me at the time.
Absolutely. That is so true. And I try to tell men and warn men, I said, we are actresses, and you might think, oh, I found a good one or what have you. And I'm like, you won't be able to tell. We're very good at being actresses and being manipulative. Those skills, some of our skills as women that we can use to take care of little babies and small toddlers and things like that, have been absolutely perverted and turned out towards the world. And like our compassion, go compassion for the family all day long. Turn it out loose on the world, and you've got compassion for all those poor people. And now you're welcoming criminals, and you're saying, oh, let them have the needles, and let them have the heroin. It's like, oh, good Lord, it's great to be a woman, but we all have our gifts and talents, and maybe some of those are better at the family. I don't know how you feel about a role for a woman and a role for a man, because we don't really live in that society anymore where we're out in the woods or whatever. We have infrastructure and civilization. So can you talk
I
to me a little
agree
bit
with
about
you on
your
that.
role?
We don't live in an environment of immediate survival risk
Right.
anymore, where there isn't a wolf at the door. Not literally. There is women can work. Uh, these guys, the trad cons that are like, go to church and find a 304 to marry and then make a bunch of money and live your life that way. We do need a different arrangement between men and women that reflects more about the times that we live in. Unless women are going to collectively agree that they'll stay out of higher education and work, that's not going to happen because we've incentivized it too much. But we do need a different deal between men and women.
Mhm.
I went seeking that deal 25 years ago and found it with my wife. We're not legally married. And I told every woman I met for quite a while, if you can't show up with your purse, we're not going anywhere. You have to show up and carry your weight. And it was
Right.
amazing how many strong, independent women flat rejected me right out of
Right.
the gate the moment they heard, oh no, me carry my weight financially? Dude, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
Uh, and I eventually met one that did. And I think that has to be a part of any modern arrangement between men and women, unless you have a contract with a woman. But here's the problem. Let's say we establish a contract between men and women now that a woman will quit work. Her dedication is to the home, taking
Mhm.
care of the children. The moment that the marriage goes south, her role in that marriage becomes a weapon to destroy him with in the family courts. She'll go in and say, well, I'm accustomed to not working. I'm accustomed to taking care of the kids. Therefore, I want you to steal all of his money and give it to me. And the
Right.
courts will do it. So that, people can say, Paul, you still got to try to, and I'm like, no, you don't. You're crazy if you try that.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, we need a new deal. I mean, I like a lot of this is Shaw's content. Um,
mhm.
he's exploring new options for a future that involve things like dowry, uh, which I don't think is out of the question. I don't think we're quite ready for it, but we do need a new deal between men and women, a new understanding, and that
Right.
understanding has to include, I'm not your wallet.
Right. So you mentioned that the women seem to have voted a little differently in this last election. And I wonder what you think about this. If the men are starting to say, you know what, I actually have standards and I'm not going to take less. I'm not going to, I'm not going to marry the 304. I'm not going to marry at all. You know, I am going to require certain things of my partner, my long-term relationship partner. They start doing that, or just saying, I'm out, I'm going to go live in the woods, I'm going to have my log cabin and my dog. And I feel like that might be the reason why women are a little bit shifting towards tradition. They're not quite getting it yet because they're kind of doing like a dress up routine, you know. But I just wonder if you think that if men start to require that or just start to say, I'm out, if that will have a correction effect on women.
I think minimally, but the problem with that hope, and I do see it as a hope, is that times have changed so significantly. Um,
Mm,
it's hard to undo the last 60 years of gender warfare that's happened. And men are already doing exactly what you described, not in significant enough numbers yet, but they are starting to climb up there with numbers of men who said, I'm out. I'm just
mm-hmm.
not doing this. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. I'm not messing with women. I'm going to get that cabin. I'm going to get myself a dog and I'm going to enjoy my life. Maybe I'll hire a prostitute every once in a while, take care
Yeah.
of my sexual tension. But this stuff of this baby bird's big, wide, gaping mouth at me every time I open my eyes in the morning is going to end. And
Right.
I think it should. I mean,
I,
the pendulum is swinging, and ladies, this is what you voted for.
Yeah, it's what you asked for. You want equality, you want all this. Guess what? It doesn't mean the men have to want to be in relationships with you. You are not entitled to relationship with them, especially if it's going to be predatorial on the women's part, which it is. I hate this, like, oh, men are predators. And I'm like, I think you need to rethink that. I think there's the opposite group, not men, are predators for the wallet, and it's covert, you know, and if you confront them on it,
Kind of hard to pass off. I demand equality in this situation. I want equality, but I want you to pay for my life and take care of it.
I want equality, but I still want you to go to war.
Yep.
You have to go to war. We get the vote, but we don't have to go to war. They always think like women are so oppressed, and it's like, what right do men have that you don't have? And what responsibilities do you have? Nothing. What duties and responsibilities do women have in today's society? Clearly zero, right? Because we really should have the responsibility of propagating the species, but clearly with declining birth rates, that's not happening because we're too busy being girl bosses and chasing some, dream of a career for our meaning and fulfillment. Meanwhile, we're the unhappiest we've ever been. We're on SSRIs, we're angry, we're resentful. Feminism hasn't turned out so well for women. It hurts women in a way just as much as it hurts men, because women might think they're doing well right now in their 20s and 30s, but as Kevin Samuels used to say, you're going to buy a dog and die alone. And that's going to happen a lot, I think, in the next few decades. We're going to see a lot of that going on, where women are just alone. And
you know what else you're going to see about that is a lot of indifferent men. A lot of men who like, don't tell me your problems, lady. I don't care.
Absolutely. I know some of them.
Yes.
They're in my emails, and, they're in my life. Is there any way, like you said, you're in a long-term relationship and have been for a couple decades plus. If men decide they want to do that, how do they protect themselves other than, making sure she's good with, 50-50 money for dates and stuff like that? How can they insulate themselves? Because there's still so many men that do want to have a woman. And as much as I say, please don't, please, protect yourselves, they're still going to try. So how do they protect themselves from things like common law, after living with somebody? What should they do? What's your advice?
There's three things that I always suggest men to do when approaching LTRs with women or whatever they want to have. The first and foremost is to show up with your balls. If you don't show up with your balls, no advice anybody will ever give you will do a lick of good. It's wasted. You have to show up prepared to see her walk at any moment and to be prepared to see her walk forever. You have to live your life with the idea, these are my boundaries, this is how I live, these are my beliefs, and if you can't be compatible with that, then there's the door. If you don't show up with that attitude, I wouldn't even bother giving somebody else more advice.
Right.
If once we pass the show up with your balls part of it, invest in an attorney and find out, make sure about where you live, whether or not you can be declared common law marriage for cohabitation. If you can, get out of that area.
All right. Just move. Yeah.
I only live in states where common law doesn't exist.
Perfect.
And I refuse to get legally married. And I made that very clear. Legal marriage is out of the question. We're not going to share bank accounts. We're not going to share assets. None of this stuff. I got me, you got you. And if we ever come to a point that we're incompatible, then you can go, and I'll be sad. I wouldn't lie and say it wouldn't hurt. Of course it would. But am I willing to see her go? if she can't deal with my frame, absolutely.
Yep.
And that's the three-part thing. Show up with your balls, don't get legally married, and make sure you can't be declared by your state to be common law married. Make
Yep.
sure,
I
I
think,
mean,
sorry.
invest $250, $300 to talk to an actual lawyer. That is
Mhm.
fractions of pennies on the dollar down the road. Get the straight dope before you make any decisions. And if it's not workable where you are, get yourself somewhere else where it is workable.
What do you think about following all the things that you said? Would it be helpful for the man and the woman to write up a contract, possibly with an attorney, just stating all this outright? Not like it's a prenup, just saying this is what we agree to, this is what we're doing, sign it, get it notarized, all of that, just to strengthen, just in case you do part ways. What do you think about that? Or is it not
Here's
really
the
necessary?
problem with that is that it actually, if you formalize it in any way, you're opening a legal door, in my opinion.
Ah,
Uh,
right.
Rely on the local law. If the law says that you can cohabitate and she can't come and say this is now, if you have a child, that we're talking a much different picture because
Hmm.
there is laws covering that and there should be. Uh,
Hmm.
but wherever you are, just forget the any kind of formal documentation of what the relationship means, because she may want to renegotiate that with a lawyer of her own at some
Oh,
point.
you don't want that. I see. That's opening a door that you don't want to go down, because anytime you're opening the door to this is legal and you don't want to
And there
make
may
it.
be places, you may be places where a family law attorney would say, that's a good idea. Here's how we'll do it. But you
Okay.
want to make sure that you go into this with tested, seasoned expert opinion behind you, because ignorance is the law of the law, as they say, is no excuse. If
Right.
if you say I didn't know we were common law marriage, they're going to say, well, good for you. Get out your checkbook.
Doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter. You're in it. You're stuck. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just I try to tell the men like going your own way really is the best thing, but I get how hard it is. So it's hard to walk that line between encouraging them to go their own way, but also trying to give them some kind of assistance in, finding the needle in the needle stack and protecting themselves from getting too many punctures. So if you were talking to a young man, say he's like 25, what kind of advice would you give him as far as not just show up with your purse, but what other sort of red flags should they look out for? What kind of character traits should they look for this partner that they might have?
One of the things that I tell young men, I tell older men this too, because I know guys that are 75 making the same stupid mistakes. It's
Oh,
amazing.
heaven's
I
sakes.
mean, it's
Heaven's
sad,
sakes.
but this is true. But one of the things I really encourage all men to do is to disabuse themselves of the romantic ethos. This is something that, I mean, it is so pernicious. It's been drilled into our heads from birth. We grow up from the time we're watching cartoons to we're consuming mass media as adults. This romantic notion of men being the dragon slayers for women, and women are pure and sugar and spice and everything nice. All
Yeah,
of this nonsense mentality men have been steeped in their whole lives. They think this way and they don't even know it. And so
right.
I try to challenge men to look inward, look at your inner white knight and kill the son of a bitch. And once you get rid of that, guess what? It actually opens the door for you to see women as human beings. They're not damsels
Yes,
in distress. They're not victims. They're not super empowered creatures of the feminine
right,
dynasty. They are just human beings like you are. And if you
right,
can set aside the romantic ethos and come to them expecting respect and giving it as a human being, you've
right.
got a better chance at a better relationship with that. But if you're walking into this saying, "Here's my diamonds and flowers and chocolates and luxury vacations and expensive gifts," dude, you're buying a whore.
That's right. Exactly. You're
Yeah.
just turning it into where she can be like, dance, monkey, dance.
Yep.
And you're turning yourself into the servant to try to be good enough for her. And that reminds me of a question I've been having. And that is, if a boy is raised by a single mother, right? And I think a lot of the times, and not just a single mother, any mother, really, because honestly, I can see single mother outcomes happening from parents who stay together just because the mother is dominant, the mother is the boss of the whole household. And so if the mother sort of expects her son to be good enough to please her, to just
This is
be
part of what you're describing the romantic model, by the way. This is
okay.
still a romantic pairing, and I don't want to get too far into the Freudian implications of all
Sure,
this,
sure.
but
Yeah,
compare that to the guy who's trying to please his wife in the same way.
exactly. That's
It's
what I
the
was going to
same
say. Does it
dynamic.
transfer?
Yes,
So they grow up thinking, I have to be good enough for mommy, and I want mommy to be pleased with me, and she likes that dynamic,
yes,
right?
he does.
She encourages it, she creates it. And then he leaves that relationship, and that's the way he thinks of the male female relationship. So I've been thinking, is this how men sort of get thrown to the wolves being the women, and they just kind of go almost looking for that dynamic because that's
Yeah,
what they've grown up thinking is right.
they eroticize their own sick, emotionally incestuous bonding with women.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into a very far-reaching conversation about this, but yes, I know guys right now that are
Sorry.
with demanding wives
Yeah.
and wives that are in control, and they're in their 50s, maybe their 60s, trying to please mommy.
Yep.
And they don't even see the transference that's happening there between these
Yep.
relationships. It's absolutely amazing. Uh, until men think through, really think through, because we're raised to not think about romantic, and but we're raised to
Right.
act and to never
Just
think.
programmed. Yep.
But once you get a man to think about his role in life, think about the romantic ethos, think about what he actually wants, what he's actually getting, then you do have a shot with them to come to their senses, so to speak, and to start making different, better decisions around women. And if they do that, they'll choose better women almost every time. Uh,
Absolutely.
but there's
Absolutely.
it is a lot of work, and I would have to say that I think probably 90% of men are hopeless in that
Yeah.
respect. They'll never get over it. They'll never beat the romantic programming or the emotionally incestuous bonding with their mothers. They'll never get out of that. They
No,
just can't
they're
conceive of
trapped.
that. Yeah.
They can't see it. They can't see. How do you think this whole women's liberation leading to promiscuity and the rampant promiscuity we have in society? You've already said that women have always been the gatekeepers of sex. So we must be the ones that are causing all this promiscuity. What do you think it does to society or
Oh,
is doing?
nothing good. Uh,
Right?
Nothing good at all. It's horrible what's happening to society. I mean, we're having more sex than ever and making less babies than
Isn't that insane?
yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, it's
and
hedonism.
it's hedonism that doesn't work out. And this is one of the areas I have a point of contention with some of the manosphere that promotes just an outright hedonistic lifestyle for men.
Mhm.
One,
Yep.
I don't think men are ever psychologically healthy unless they have a connection to something greater than themselves. I believe that firmly and honestly, and that just pursuing sex with women as a lifestyle, I did it for a while. I can tell you it's an empty, dead end path in life
Mhm.
that you'll eventually get sick of. I wish I
Mhm.
could have just skipped over that part of my life. I would have been better off for it.
Right.
But we've told women that there are no bars on their behavior. And so,
Right.
all right, you get pregnant 5 times, yeah, 5 abortions, no problem.
Oh, well, right. We've removed all the consequences and all the accountability.
Yes,
So it's just go forth. And we've told women that it's somehow empowering to sort of be a 304. Like it's somehow a good thing and you're empowered. And I think a lot of these women think, I know they think that, oh, all these men want me, therefore I'm valuable. And it's like, no, it doesn't mean that. It just means that men like sex.
sex with you. Yes.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you're valuable at all. In fact, you're devaluing yourself, just sharing it with everybody. What do you think? Because I also had this thought recently. What do you think about, the top 1% or 10% of guys that are getting all the action mostly? What do you think it does to their brains? Because they've got women throwing themselves at them right and left. And I think that would be very difficult for any man to, say no to. So how do you think that's affecting them? Like
I
you
think,
just said, like at the end of the day, they're going to realize it's empty. So do you
well,
think
if they're
that's what?
narcissists, then it'll feed their mental health problems for quite a while if they're that narcissistic. But also, you look at somebody like Elon Musk. If that guy didn't have $250 billion, he would be in jail.
Yeah,
Um,
you would.
yes,
Child support everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, I
absolutely.
can't believe that he's considered part of the conservative movement because, you know, uh, he seems it's pretty anti-family to just impregnate people all over the place and have these children growing up, without a father, without a proper father. You cannot be a father to all those children. It's completely irresponsible and not something we should celebrate.
I
It
agree.
leads to disaster. So it just astounds me that no one really says that. You know what I mean? Because they like that he's whatever on their side, and I just
Well,
think that that's not
I like,
helpful.
I like him in some other ways. I think he's an amazing innovator. He's a genius.
Right.
He's accomplished stuff that is just mind-blowing stuff I couldn't
Right.
hold a candle to if I had to. So it's not like I'm going to sit here and say the guy's a moron or anything
No.
like it. But he is where it concerns sex.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And just like we were saying a moment ago, if he didn't have they're quite beautiful women. If he didn't have these women throwing themselves at him, then this wouldn't be happening, and it is a dollar sign. These women know if they have a child with Elon Musk, they're set, and just the child is such a victim. I can't stand how no one seems to care about what a child needs growing up because people are in it for whatever they want, both men and women, because you can't degrade one without degrading the other. Like we're tied to each other, whether anybody admits that or not. And so if you pull men down, all of society follows. And if you pull women down, which I think feminism did, because
Sure did.
telling us promiscuity is empowering is pulling us down. And so, we're all down here. And then we're the children. They're suffering, they're the victims. I just think that, the last 150 years or so, 170 years, I guess now, has just been like a free fall of society going down. And you and I are awake to it. Most people are not. Do you think there's any turning it around?
Not without a big collapse first. I don't, I got to say, I really wish I could be more hopeful.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to say is that part of this thing with Elon Musk, this goes back, I think, to some of the hypocrisy that most of society lives by. Remember when Donald Trump had that Billy Bush conversation recorded? And yes, when you're a star, when you're rich and powerful, they'll let you do anything. They'll let you, grab them by the what.
Grab them. Yeah, grab them by the,
It's
yeah.
true. It's
Yes,
true.
it
If
is true.
you could be ugly ass Henry Kissinger in his current condition. And if you're worth $1 billion, there will
Yeah.
be gorgeous young women throwing themselves at you all day long
You
and
could be
will get
Harvey Weinstein.
angry at you if you don't grab them by the you know what.
That's right. And just with you saying that, I thought to myself, do you think it actually made women angry because of, oh, how dare you? Or did they get angry because it was a revealing of them?
Yeah, what's
They
wrong with
were like,
you?
oh,
You know what?
shoot, it's
Why not
true.
me?
They're
Oh,
like, oh, don't say that about us. Like, don't reveal us, because they know it's true. Women know it's true too. I hate when we're like, oh, we're not dainty little flowers. We know exactly what's up. I think that women didn't like it because it was telling on them. It was the
yes.
truth. And as far as like Trump saying that, and I'm not a Trump sycophant, like I don't just follow everything he does or whatever. There are good things and there are, not so good things. But I think him saying that was not, I mean, the fact that we were just like, oh, women say all kinds of things. Give me a break. But we
Two
pretend that we are just like, oh, how dare you? And no, we're not all
and men
innocent.
shrink up like little flowers when women behave that way. Oh no, I've offended a woman. I better
Oh,
hold my head in
right,
my hand and apologize.
right,
That's crazy. No, but to go to your original question, I don't think this stuff gets better until it gets much worse. I think you're right. Men and women are biologically wired for cooperation. And it's
right,
the only way that the human civilization takes a single step forward is through that cooperation. We're
right,
seeing things are like this right now with men and women separated, and we're seeing everything fall apart. Everything is really going to trash. And
yeah,
I think we're on a downward slide that's not going to be corrected until after we hit rock bottom. And there is real consequences. People
yes,
don't know what it'll be like. You will see a time in our society will where men will go past women starving on the street and not even look at them.
yeah,
They just
I
don't
have,
care.
I have talked to some men in my life, and they are so black pilled by now that they'll even say, I don't care. I don't care what happens. I don't care what happens to her. This is what she wanted. This is what she voted for. This is, all that stuff. So let her. And I mean, they are very black pilled about it. And it is,
Those guys have been told they've been told they're trash the whole lives. All they've heard is
absolutely
that they're terrible human beings that shouldn't exist and that women are superior to them. That's all
right.
they've ever
And
been told.
they've had to take the abuse. They've had to take all of that within their relationships. They've been brokenhearted. Men have hearts. Newsflash to women. Men
Hello.
have hearts. They love deeply, they love forever. I mean, the music, sculptures, art, it's all men inspired because it's very different than how women experience it. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to come to terms with because, I'd been propagandized. And the idea that women love very differently, I was like, no, we don't. But I was stuck in the feelings mode of it. And I heard a man say once that his grandfather said, I made a decision to love your grandmother.
Yep.
It's a decision. It's not, I felt a certain way, so we got this marriage or whatever. It's like, no, this is a serious commitment and I'm in it for the long haul. And I think men are, I don't know, I don't know if they're hardwired more for that or I don't know. What do you think about that? The
Yeah, I
different
think
ways that
we're
men and women,
brainwashed into believing that love is a feeling.
right?
It's
Absolutely.
not. It's not
No,
an infatuation. They're brainwashed to believe that the infatuation they feel, the sexual charge they feel at the beginning of a relationship is love. Has nothing to do with love.
right.
Absolutely nothing. It's just pure neurochemicals going on in your brain, and that's
Right.
all it is.
Right.
Love happens 15, 20, 25 years down the road in a relationship when you've been through thick and thin together, when you've been through cancer together. I know because I've lived through this stuff. That's
Right.
when you start talking about love, in my opinion. But,
Right.
oh, she loves me. That's why I'm not going to get a prenup, you moron.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That really has no, that sort of infatuation and everything. It's a lie, and it's nothing to base a life on. You know, it's very serious. Like you said, the romanticization. That's a hard word to say. Do you know what I mean? That is just warped our minds into not understanding what that commitment's about. And it's actually very beautiful. You're talking about going through cancer, going through the hard times and the hardships because life isn't fair. That's the beautiful part where you can look back and go, you know what? We made it through that. That's a whole different level of of I want to say love, but that word has been completely bastardized, you know,
Well, we've
because
confused love for romance. I mean, the Greeks had a
yeah,
word, storge, where it meant a familial love, a love you might have for a child, also the love you might have for a spouse after
right.
years of being together. It's a selfless, unconditional kind of love that you cannot have at the beginning of a relationship. You don't get access to that in 10 years, maybe 15 years. But we've confused romantic stuff with love, and it's a sickness that is rotting the core of our society. Romance is the biggest damage to Western society, that more than feminism, more than communism, more than anything I can think of. Romantic ethos is killing love between men and women in the West.
That is a powerful statement. And I can't refute it. I think that's absolutely true. It really cuts to the core of all of it. Because like you said, we're meant to cooperate with each other. And when we're doing the whole romanticizing thing, it blurs everything. It messes it up. It messes up the order. So the last thing I want to ask you, because I talk a lot about God's order, man, woman, children. You know what I mean? God, man, woman, children. Do you think that there is a natural order? And do you think that, you know, when society crumbles, which I think too is inevitable, that it'll sort of reset that? I know that's a complicated question, but
Well, I don't think history ever truly repeats itself.
okay.
Um, I think we'll get a different version of this along the same lines. But for me, if you want to look at cooperatively how men and women coexist in a healthy way, look at Proverbs. It describes it exactly. And there's all kinds of scripture that refers us to men being men, women being women, this cooperation between the two for the sake of the family, and there being a hierarchy involved in that. But God, man to woman, and that doesn't, Jesus loved us enough to die for us. So the fact that I'm lower on the hierarchy than him, I'm okay with that. Uh,
Yes, it's
and it
loving.
doesn't take
It's not
women.
oppression. Yeah.
Yes, it's not oppression, it's order. And
It's love and it's order. Absolutely. He's not ruling over us because he wants to oppress us. It's a gift. And I wish we could see it like that. And maybe when society crumbles, it will reorganize it to that.
when 15 to 20% of women are eating out of dumpsters, they'll open up their minds to this order a lot more.
I think you're right. I
And
think
I don't say that with vindictiveness.
no,
It's sad.
you're
It's
not wishing it to happen. You can
no,
just you can see it coming.
it's
And you
coming.
know, denying that isn't very helpful. I absolutely think so too. And in a way, you go, well, I don't want that to happen, but then again, I want it to reorder. So, you know, life is unfair and life is tough. And I just think that's the direction we're headed, you know. But
I agree.
well, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on my show. This was a wonderful chat. I could probably talk to you for about 5 hours and learn a ton.
Well, let's do it
But
again sometime.
I think
We
it sounds good.
have
Is there anything you want to shout out, or you know, your website or whatever? You know,
You
go
can
ahead and do that.
find me on Twitter at Real Paul Elum, and in my profile there, you'll find links to XY Crew. There's a placard there behind me from one of our recent events. We are Red Pill Men gathering to live healthy, lives in compassion supported brotherhood. We're gathering this November in Thailand for a vacation. There's going to be men from India, from Australia, from across Europe and North America. This is the
Wow.
third event that we've had live. Consider joining us. There's something really remarkable about being with like-minded men. And
Absolutely.
with all respect to my host here, it is an environment absent of women. Uh,
That's good. We need men's spaces. We
yes,
need
we do.
brotherhood. Absolutely. Bring brotherhood back. Bring brotherhood back. Well, thank you, Paul. And I hope that all the men watching this will take that seriously and consider going if they're able to. But anyway, until next time, and we will do this again. Nice having you, Paul, and take care till I see you again. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.